Hey girls, can you turn your mic on, please?
Oh, that was good. I learned after the age of 40 that I was ADHD, as my doctoral studies was coming to an end, but in an end in a way that I didn't expect, which was that I was going to fail to get that doctorate. And so I don't necessarily pay attention. Last time it got to 0 and it said hit OK to return, and I had looked at it for 5 minutes. So the verses today are verses on life change. And I asked John if I could preach because there's a little portion of this that really touches my heart. And as a psychotherapist back then, I work for a software company now, I really focused on some phrases in these verses that were important in understanding life change. I believe in the calling to counseling and ministry. That God said, listen, I made you this way. And since He made me that way, I have a tendency to look at scriptures kind of from the eyes of a person that has done counseling, has done pastoring, and likes to help people. So I took this, I saw this just a couple of weeks ago as I was preparing the sermon, and I thought, boy, this really applies. Every man dies, but not every man really lives. And it's true of Christianity. My father was a person that became a Christian, I think, in his teenage years, late teenage years. It's quite a common thing to do. And for the next 50-some years, he didn't do much with it. He didn't really live the Christianity. He's saved, he's in heaven, I'm glad for that. But he really didn't live Christianity. The last words he said to my mother before he died, I was there that night. He had been on dialysis for 5 years, and he was starting to have strokes that were taking his mind, and my mom took him off the dialysis. And the last words he said were curse words, because she wasn't going to do something for him. And I thought, he didn't curse all the time, but I thought, I leaned over and I said, do you really want those to be the last words to your lovely wife? And he kind of teared up a little bit, and then died 4 hours later. But I would like to think that nobody in this room would want to settle for that everyone would like to move forward with their Christianity, and what that means. So while we're not going to declare independence for Scotland, which is what William Wallace was about, I'm at least borrowing that phrase just because I felt like it applies somewhat. So let's go back to the verses. I'm only going to go through essentially this first slide of the verses. Yeah. But I'll make a comment on the other ones as well. Therefore, my beloved, as you have always obeyed, I don't sound like her, right? I should have her read this. So now, not only as in my presence, but much more in my absence, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling, for it is God who works in you both to will and to work for His good pleasure. Do all things without grumbling or disputing, that you may be blameless and innocent children of God, without blemish in the midst of a crooked and twisted generation, among whom you shine as lights in the world, holding fast to the word of life, so that in the day of Christ I may be proud that I did not run in vain or labor in vain, even if I am to be poured out as a drink offering upon the sacrificial offering of your faith. I'm glad and rejoice with you all. Likewise, you also should be glad and rejoice with me. Just in a quick overview of these verses, as if you were going to do it, say, in a devotional, you'd probably come out with these conclusions. Continue and growing in your Christian life. That would be one of the points. God will be helping you towards His good work. Live without grumbling and arguing. You are lights to this world, very similar to what Jesus said with your don't other's success. So I'm just going to focus on the first two verses, though, and starting out, I'm going to go past one verse. If you have that book, you can follow it in it, and I'll say next slide, kind of. Okay, so go to the next slide, please. Therefore, we're just going to take the word therefore. On the next slide, I've concluded a number of things that are in the therefore. What happened prior to him getting to this point that he was going to talk about these points in his letter? Well, normally it would be closer verses in, but I included something about Paul himself because he's the author. He said in chapter 1, "For me to live is Christ, and to die is gain." Does anyone else in this room say that on a regular basis? You do. Okay. Well, but that's how he's living life. And that is not my experience. I mean, I've been at this Christianity for over 40 years, and it's God has changed me, but I'm not saying that yet. I'm hoping to, or at least I will in heaven. He went even further in Galatians, and he says, "I have been crucified with Christ." I think we all agree with that. And I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. The life I now live in the body, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. We can identify probably with a number of those things. We can understand God's love for us. But do we really say, I no longer live, but Christ lives in me? I understand Christ walking with me. I don't understand Christ living, lives in me. I mean, I can understand that too, but it's not that I no longer live. Paul is most definitely Paul. He comes across as Paul. He's got a personality as Paul. He's got to be saying something here that's a little bit beyond where I'm at. And it's a challenge to me to say, well, I'd like to get there. But getting a little closer to the verses in chapter 2 itself, he says, being of the same mind, being of the same love. John, in the last couple of weeks, has gone over this section here. Count others more significant than yourself. If you meditated on that verse and the one that follows it, for, say, the next month, every day for the next month, how would you be a different person? Count others more significant than yourself. Look not only under your own interests, but the interests of others. That's what follows it. Have this mind among you, which was yours in Christ. He humbled himself. Remember John talking about what humility is. It's not focusing on the negative. It's not focusing on the inadequacies we have. That's not what humility is, not at least for Christ. He's the creator and sustainer of the universe. He's the Lord over everything. He's not inadequate in anything. He's not doing anything wrong. His humility, as John said last week, has nothing to do with he's being obedient to the Father. And beyond that being other-oriented, his humility is that he comes and walks with us as a holy God without sin. He walks with us. He doesn't spend a lot of time telling us what we're doing wrong either. Pointing out our sin. My God, he could point out our sin at such a level that we couldn't bear it. But he humbled himself and he walked with us. And then he said before the foundation of the earth, before there was a single atom outside of God's being, which I don't know that it has any atoms anyway, he said, I will die for what we're going to create. These people that we're going to create with free will. With a free will that, how many days was it? It's hard to say. I mean, they don't give us days in the Garden of Eden, but how many days was it did it take them to step away from God and choose their own way? Didn't take very long. And we've been doing it ever since. Some people have, I think, arrogantly said, well, if I had been in the Garden of Eden, I would have been obedient. That's not a very wise person. Okay? We are just that way. And he said, okay, I'm going to die for you. I don't care what amount of sin you had, and I will die and I will bear the burden of your sin and the billions of other people's sins. I will, as one God in three persons, inseparable, be separated from the Father, because the Father can't look on me with sin. I will experience that for you. How's that for being other-oriented? And Paul's just saying, as he's, no longer I who live, but Christ in me, as he's that kind of a person, he's saying, this is the example. Therefore, now that I've set this example before you, therefore, let's get into the scriptures. So, what I'm going to focus here on is the next slide. Work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. Does that works righteousness? What does that mean? Work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. Well, I went to seminary not to become a pastor or not to even preach today. I went to seminary to become a psychologist and went to seminary so that I could get Bible and theology studies as well, because at the time I was only 6 years into my Christianity, and I thought, boy, it would be great, go to graduate school and have all this wisdom around me and pointing me in the right direction. And so they said, okay, salvation is this. You've been saved. You are saved, being saved. You're going to be saved. 3 different saves. The first one is obviously the initial. You crossed the line. You accepted Christ into your life. You've accepted His death for our sin. You're rejoicing in His resurrection. It gives you the opportunity for resurrection. You're saved. And hopefully, unlike my dad, he probably moved forward. I'm just saying, in the long run, it wasn't extremely noticeable, but he was a nice person, generally speaking. What do you do the rest of your life? Are you going to move forward? Are you going to be a person that lives? You died. But most people don't live. Are you going to be a person that lives? Are you going to be a person that wants to be different as a result of hearing God's word? Having worshipped with those songs. Those songs were wonderful. I thought, since they all connected to my sermon, I thought, hey, maybe I could just, go to an early lunch. That's good enough. And you guys wouldn't have to worry about whether or not I'm okay. Do you want to live? It's that salvation, that a desire to be different tomorrow than you are today, possibly because God just kind of nudged you a little bit as that's the best you can do. Okay, fear and trembling. The classic fear and trembling. Can you go to the next slide? The classic fear and trembling is respecting God, honoring God, being in awe before God. This is the result of my mother. What do you think? She's pretty good at architecture. She died before our 25th anniversary, and I think it honored her in the kind of person she was that we took a little bit of that money that we inherited, and we took a cruise in the Western Mediterranean, but we were in Rome for 4 days of that trip, and we toured the Vatican, so we saw St. Peter Basilica. And I don't really have all that many awe experiences. I mean, I've seen some pretty nice things because I got into photography and I captured a few nice things in photography, but I haven't really been, awestruck by that many things on earth. I really anticipate heaven is going to be awesome.
Amen.
Okay? That's when I'm going to start using that word. I don't use awesome much at all because things are great. Things are beautiful, but they're not awesome. But I walked through the door, which is a smaller door than the main big door. I mean, the main big door, I think they just take dump trucks and, other things that are really big in the main big door. I don't know. But they have it just because it looks good, I think. But over to the side, you go through the door they're going to allow you in. And it's a lot smaller door. It's only probably 20 feet high. And you walk in, and this is actually a little bit into the sanctuary, as it were. 50,000 people can be in this church. You can see what they look like. Pretty small people, right? So when you go out and you get in your car, if you happen to be going this direction, look at the old Methodist church there, and just ignore the annex that they put on it. Just the stone church. Put that in that building, and it wouldn't touch the ceiling. And it wouldn't block your walking up to the front of the church either. It is huge. It's amazing. And I almost said awesome. But I look at it and it's still, because I'm so desirous to see what heaven is like, I'm still reserving that word. It was pretty amazing though. Okay, my wife and I, you can see that black band on the dome area. Those all that light coming in there was, if you look at the picture on the top, it would be those columns and openings. That's how they light the interior. Obviously, they have a few lights, as you can see in the ceiling, but over the years before electricity, they mostly did it with all those openings you see in the ceiling, getting natural light in. Well, that black line up there, we were up there, and I tell you what, those people down there really look pretty small. I think it's 460 feet or something like that to the top of the dome. We were in where the columns are on the dome above the main dome part. We were also up there. So it was exciting, amazing, awesome. It was being held off for heaven. Okay, but here's the thing. The guy that's writing this book, he's trying to tell the people in Corinth, boasting isn't really of much value. But he says, I know that there was a guy 14 years ago that was caught up to the third heaven. And he saw things unspeakable. I think that's his humble way of saying, I'm not going to get into boasting, but I have done that. Can you imagine how it would transform your life to be caught up in a vision? He said he doesn't know if it was in body or out of body, all these different things, as he's saying it in 2 Corinthians. He doesn't know how it happened, but he was there. And he saw things unspeakable. How would your life be? How would your life be transformed? John, who outlived pretty much all the other apostles, said in 1 John, I don't know what we're going to be like, but I know this, we will be like him because we'll see him as he is. There's a key word in there that you really need to focus on and get your orientation in that scripture on, because when we see Christ, we will be automatically transformed to be like him. Not in all, we're not going to be God. But I think what both Paul and John are talking about, we will have the kind of character that God has, that God intends us to have. God can say, you may be faithless. You may lose faith or be faithless in your relationship with me, but I will be faithful because I can't deny myself. Do you have the kind of character that says, I can't be unfaithful? I can't. I can't be unloving. I can't accept something that isn't truth. God is saying these things because he says, I'm love, I'm truth, I'm faithful, I'm holy, I'm righteous, I'm all these things. He's unwavering from that. That is his character. That is, God isn't designed, but, it's just in him, innately in him. That is his character. And that is what John is saying. It's hard to imagine what we're going to be like, but when we see him, we'll have that character. Is that exciting? Amen. So, maybe that's why he leaves us a little rough on earth, because he wants us to be really excited about that change there. But we can be moving towards that, and that's what Paul is saying right here. Work on your salvation. Okay, the next section is actually the section that really draws me to this scripture. For it is God who works in you, both to will and to work for his good pleasure. Well, that seems real obvious. Jesus says in John 15, he's going to be in us. The Father's going to be in us. He talks about the Holy Spirit. He's going to be in us. The Holy Spirit's empowering us. They're in us. So they're obviously working in us. That's not the issue for me. There's those Armenians, however you pronounce that. Okay, thank you. We'll go with John's pronunciation. That believe you can lose your salvation. John Wesley would be one of those. There's a lot of people around the world that choose that doctrinal position. And it's all really based on we have a free will. So we can always choose not to follow God. Now, I'm more of a Calvinist, and I'm probably not. I don't know enough about Calvin, and I should probably say that, but I'm about security. I can't lose my salvation. And I've tested it. I have been really pissed off at God. I really wanted to say, and Satan has used temptations in my life to say, are you just chasing after a new belief system? See, I came into Christianity when I was 25, and I'd already studied great religions in the world. I studied philosophy. I was I didn't call myself New Age, but I'd be New Age. I studied these things, and what brought me to Christianity is a crisis. My first marriage was falling apart, and I was thinking, I cannot depend on the things that I've been studying and believing in to get me where I want to be in my character. My wife left me because she was out to find her own life. It's not like she loved me because I just brutal or anything. But still, I look at it as both people have some responsibility. And I look at it and I thought, I could have been a better husband still. Particularly the last time, because she left me 3 times before. And the last time, I was a little bit hard-hearted. And I thought, I'm not going to be jilted again without a little bit of warning here. So, I wasn't going to just open up my heart and do that. So I was a little bit hard-hearted. She probably didn't feel as comfortable that last time we were together. But I looked at that and I said, well, what is this philosophy, what are these religions in the world really doing for me? Not much. And Satan's trying to give me that same thing. And I get there in sort of that middle of the night, stubbornness, anger kind of thing towards God, because life isn't going the way I want. And I thought, this is crazy. To leave God, to leave Christ, would be like to say
there is no air. There's no gravity. I mean, it's just like such a reality to me. How can I ever leave it? I have a free will. Supposedly I can leave it. But I can't leave it because he's so impacted the value of who he is in my life, right? Amen. So move on to the next. So the free will kind of thing gets me here is like, is it like God is the puppet master and he just kind of pulls strings and, gets us to do what he wants to do? How does he get past our free will? If we have a free will. Well, I had an experience before I ever went off to graduate school. In the first few years of my Christianity, I was a small group leader in a singles group, and I met this woman in my small group as a newcomers group leader, and I really wanted to encourage her to come to church on a regular basis. And I thought, I had talked to her on Thursday night, and she would kind of think, yeah. Have you ever had people, yeah. Okay, so I thought, I'm going to be clever. I go and teach Sunday school class Sunday morning, so I'm there earlier than most people. I'm doing first and second grade Sunday school class, and I had to walk right past her apartment. So I thought, I'm going to just pray. God, wake her up and get her to church. 3 weeks in a row. I was kind of, did I say I was ADHD? I kind of forget because I kind of live in the moment, and if I'd said it, I would have forgotten. Have I said I'm ADHD? Okay, and I learned that when I was over 40 years old. Well, I was still then, I just didn't know it. But you get impatient as an ADHD person. You kind of want things to resolve really quickly because you live in the moment, and the moment isn't very long. So you want things to resolve really quickly. And so 3 weeks is, come on. I know people pray for salvation of people for decades, and I think that's wonderful. But it would never work for an ADHD person. I'd probably forget they existed. But 3 weeks and nothing happened. So I'm quite frankly, I'm getting a little annoyed with God. And because I'm praying according to God's will. Have you ever done that? You tell God that you're praying according to this, well, what's with him? Okay, I do that more frequently than I should. So I'm having this discussion with God, and God, he doesn't speak much, does he? But he does leave impressions in my mind, and the impression was, I respect free will, which is the same argument he used when I said, I was praying that you would save my marriage. Why did you divorce me? I respect your free will. It wasn't much comfort then, and it wasn't much comfort this time. But I'm a little farther along, and I think, okay, he's good, he's consistent. I'm not going to get anywhere with him. He's saying this thing. So I said, okay, so how do I pray? I wasn't as polite as the disciples teach me to pray. But he said, pray for her desire. I said, okay. So that, the fourth week, 3 weeks she hasn't been there. The fourth week I said, Lord, wake her up with a desire to come to church. I won't push back beyond that. She didn't come. The fifth week, same thing, she didn't come. The sixth week, the same thing, I prayed. And quite frankly, I went in the sanctuary, really not expecting anything. And there she was. And I said, well, so nice to see you. She said, yeah, the last 3 weeks, I woke up with a desire to come to church. The first 2 weeks, I just thought, I'd rather sleep in. The third week, I thought, God must be trying to tell me something. Did he violate her free will? No. Now, he wasn't teaching me how to pray for people, but he was teaching me, as a future counselor, that you have to understand how a person's will works. So, we normally as counselors deal with thoughts and beliefs and feelings and behaviors. Like I said, I'm work for a software company now. But I did five years of being a psychotherapist down in Union Gospel Mission. And there's some tough stories there, you know. And you don't just turn people around, you know, that have kind of done that kind of thing to their life, just, you know, with a prayer or a few easy statements. And this is Mental Health Month, or, you know, a reminder of mental health. And I honestly, you know, there are people that have very, very difficult issues in life. So I don't want to minimize that at all. But we normally live our life, all of us live our lives in this thought, beliefs, feelings, you know. And an example of that, go to the next slide. My wife and I have different views on height. This is a picture I took a few months ago. Now, my wife would have been up behind, it's hard to see kind of blown up like that, but there's a fencing up there on top of that cliff. That's where the park is. If you go to Bruce Falls, that's where the park is. And she would have been there, except she's not there. She's home and let me go on my own. Well, I'm ADHD, which is a little bit of a thrill seeker. I thought the better picture would be right out at this point. Now, to get perspective of how far it's down from that little snow right in front of me, that's a 200-foot waterfall. And the Microsoft developer standing up on the cliff, he's about 100 feet higher than me. There's a little bit of danger there. An ADHD person is just having a great old time. But my wife wouldn't have had a good old time. We've been to the Grand Canyon with the kids, and, you know, I felt like, you know, the best thing is to get them over their fears. So I moved them all out. We, you know, I have 3 kids, and as kids, little kids, we got them out, and we scooted up. And we sat down first. And then we scooted our way up to the edge, and we dangled our feet over the edge. I didn't have them look down like that. I'm dealing with gravity, you know, and where the center of gravity is, and it's always going to be on the solid rock. But then we kind of scooted our way back, and then we stood up and we left. And my wife was behind me, livid, I think, that I was doing this with the kids. We see things differently, okay? We experience things differently. We have our way of thinking about the world. We have our feelings, and some people, you know, talk about, you know, their feelings as, you know, I don't feel he loves me. I don't feel he respects me. I don't feel this or that. There's a feeling aspect to it, but they're actually not believing he loves, respects, or things like that. It's more of it's a belief system. But we have those feelings. But go to the next slide there. Well, we have a heart. I mean, it's not this heart, but it's in the mind. But it's where our values basically lie. And our values are impacted by our behaviors, our feelings, our thoughts. Our thoughts are always primary. But we have a set of values, and we have conflicting values at times too, right? Just anybody here have conflicting values? They have to kind of go between 1 or 2 values. And we're not even talking Christian values here. It's just simply you got a couple of values and you got to go in between them sometimes. Counseling is, this may or may not work. This is a new Starbucks cup lid. And if I get it just kind of so, we would have it kind of balanced. But the idea here is that when things are in balance, and it's nothing looks like it can't ever be in balance here. When things are in balance, life is going, and you have really no need to change. If you're going to go to a psychotherapist, something's out of balance. You're just kind of it's going up and down, and you're not comfortable with the fact that life is out of balance. And so you come in, just like going to a regular doctor, and sermon's on. That's what I was talking with you. You go to a doctor when the symptoms are taken care of. You don't go to a doctor. I sometimes go years between seeing a doctor because I only go in for symptoms, and when the symptoms are gone, that's it. I noticed that to be true in counseling, and the reason I'm not a counselor anymore is I thought I'd like to start working in a church, and I did, and for a while. And then I had a church for a while, and then I worked in recovery ministry for a while, and I kind of want a longer relationship than the insurance is only going to pay for so many sessions, and you're going to see them until the symptoms are gone, and then they're gone, and you know that the symptoms are going to be back. Depression, anxiety, marital difficulties, and they get 6 sessions with their health insurance. I'm not going to solve a marriage in 6 sessions. They're going to solve a marriage anyway. But as soon as it comes back to not being out of balance, you kind of move on, and you don't change. So God has to do a couple of different things to move you in the direction. We did it with the woman. He just put a different value in her heart. Go to church. Grow in your relationship with people in the church. I have no idea the thoughts that went through her mind as she was doing that, but he's going that way. Now, this was in a sermon that I used at Mosaic, probably 8 years ago. And I decided to, not only do we have this, but I decided the dark side. And the holy, royal side. Gold. Okay, so God may give you a nudge that something's going wrong, not as healthy as you hope to be, and that kind of throws you out of balance. At the same time, he probably says, hey, there's a better way. And so this is kind of the back and forth and the back and forth. Well, he took Paul up to heaven, and Paul went like this. He got a vision for heaven that made everything down here look really pretty bad. And he just, that's why he wrote so much of the New Testament, I think, is that he really had some insights that God was using. Okay. So, in Romans 12, 1 and 2, Paul says, I appeal to you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies. I'm going to speak faster. So, okay. The living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God and what is good and acceptable and perfect. God is using in this verse the three things I had circled around there. He's talking about be transformed by the renewing of your mind. I'm a cognitive behavioral therapist. Believe me, I go in the direction of the thoughts are cheap. They're the ones that will tell you how much to value those feelings that you're experiencing. They're also the ones that are going to tell you what are you experiencing in general and how valuable is the basic behavioral experience you're having. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. But in this verse, he's talking about, I appeal to you by the mercies of God. What he's saying there, this whole mercies of God, is something that is extremely profound and is central to the way Paul preaches. He says, our gospel, the way we preach, is Christ crucified. Now, Protestants like an empty cross. Catholics like Jesus on the cross, right? Protestants say, well, we're resurrection oriented, and that's fine. But Paul, in effect, went the Catholic way, obviously before, but he preached Christ crucified. Why would he preach Christ crucified? I mean, the hope of our resurrection comes from Christ being resurrected. Because it says everything was true that Christ said. But our life really comes from the mercies of God shown to us in that cross. And I'll tell you, every time God is challenging me, when I'm kind of frustrated with God and we're at odds, He's always bringing up the cross. 1984, Christmas Eve. I'm going to church with the intention of committing suicide that night. My life was not going well. And I was going to be spending the next day, the first Christmas in my 30 years of life. I was going to spend the first Christmas alone, completely alone. And two of my roommates had left. I didn't have the money to go and visit my parents on the West Coast. I was living in Denver. And two of my roommates left to be with family, and that was understandable. And the third roommate was just pissed off at me. And he didn't want anything to do with me. I had hurt his feelings, and that was the end of that. So I had a lethal plan, and you need to do that if you're going to commit suicide. And I went to church. I don't know why, but I just felt like I needed to go to church because it wasn't between me and God. I just was hopeless in life. Still expected to be in heaven, but hopeless in life. And a person that I just knew, an acquaintance over the last few years, said, "So what are your plans for Christmas?" And I said, "Oh, things kind of fell through. I don't have any plans." He said, "Well, why don't you come over to our house?" I already knew the guy. He was running in these circles, and I was over in these circles, and I'll get by doing something, which was going to be commit suicide. And so I left, and I decided to stop by my house, and before I took this 30-mile walk in Denver weather at Christmas, and just sat in my basement in the dark and just said, "God, how did it get here? How did I lose it this much that I would want to commit suicide? I don't know what I'm doing wrong with it. Just life." See, I have a tendency to get bothered by my failures, and it takes me into an emotional dark place, which takes me into depression. And so I was there in the basement, and the roommate that didn't want anything to do with me comes home. He's upstairs milling around in the kitchen. I can hear the noises up there. I thought, dang, it's going to be hard to get out of this house and take my 30-mile walk. And I said, "God, what should I do?" He said, "Go up and apologize and see what you can do about restoring that relationship." We had that whole other-oriented thing in the verses before, the therefore in the verses before, being other-oriented. Do you really get out of suicidal depression by being nice to somebody? Is that how you're supposed to do it? God has a wacky way of looking at life. I had one of the most enjoyable Christmases in my life because we restored that relationship. The reason it was so enjoyable is not because he was a wonderful person, but because I saw God working so mightily in that relationship. I did not expect him to accept my apology. He ended up going on to leave. He tried to, a few months later, I decided that woman back there, my wife, she hadn't been coming to church for a while, and I decided, as a nice person, I got back to being a nice person, I would try and get her to go to church, kind of like that other girl, going to church. I didn't have any interest in these people. I'm just kind of like people. And so I helped her get back to church. while since I didn't die. But that same guy tried to ruin the marriage. He went and talked to the pastor, and he was homosexual, and he tried to imply that I was homosexual, and the pastor came up to us and said, I can't marry you. Not if you're homosexual. I haven't dealt with that. I said, who told you that? He said, well, I can't tell you. That's confidential. Don't you love that kind of thing? When people can hide behind confidentiality, ripping your life apart. I said, did you know that my ministry calling was to the homosexual community? At least at that time, I thought that. So yes, we did go to a gay bar because I was trying to insert myself into his life enough to have some relationship with them so that I could speak about Christ. Oh, okay, all married. Anyway, so the next slide, and then I'll go to the conclusion. What we have is the mind of Christ and the heart of Christ. We have our own mind and our own values, right? Well, that's now the challenge between the two. How do we get to have God the better way we go, the will kind of thing? Well, the only way I've ever found is these conversations with God. That I talk to God. So, I'm a bit of a perfectionist, but I'm lazy, so I don't overdo it. See, I really want life to go the way I am. It's my personality. Things should go in a very orderly way. I probably should have been an accountant, but I chose not to do that, become a counselor. Once in a while, my wife doesn't do things in an orderly way. She doesn't do it the way, at least my orderly mind thinks it should be done. And I can get frustrated. And I can get kind of nitpicky when I get frustrated. And over time, I have certainly seen that it kind of eats at her. But I don't really, I was right, so I don't really want to, apologize for that. So I go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, 1 o'clock in the night, and I have, since we become empty nesters, I had deliberately made a pact with God that I will try to love my wife more and more every day. Make her feel special in the absence of kids running around the house. And I think I've generally worked okay in that. But I have these imperfections still, right? And so I deliberately turn to my left. I can never fall asleep on my left side. But that's in the direction that she's sleeping, and I pray for her, and I thank God for her. And I say, what a wonderful blessing she is in my life. And somehow that conversation, God gets me to this place of thinking to myself, I don't think God's using these words, you jerk. Why do you keep doing this? Why do you keep nitpicking on stupid little things that aren't worthwhile and hurting the woman you love? So I wake up in the morning and I say, I'm sorry. And it is, I'm telling you this now because this is the big sin in my life. It's not that I haven't killed anybody for a long time. None of these big sins, but I am working on being a pain in the butt as a nitpicking person. And I am saying, God, I need your heart because I don't want to break her heart by being such a nitpicking person. And she's actually told me that she's noticed in the last couple of weeks, I've been a little bit better on that. It's not perfect, there was a guy sitting in the first service and he says, one day at a time. I said, amen, brother. We got to just deal one day at a time. God's got the long plan. And I'll never be perfect until I see him face to face. Okay, have I taken up my time? Way more. Shall we just call it Oh, this now?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I didn't even talk about my, oh,